What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Dustin and Tonya podcast.
My name is Tonya.
And I am Dustin, and we are your hosts, and we are so grateful to be here with you guys today.
So grateful.
Man, today we have an awesome topic, and it's going to be hard for you guys to understand because we're going to talk about a time to be quiet. All right. Enough of that. So ultimately, we took some time this weekend, and in the Bible, there's a Bible verse, Ecclesiastes 3:7, and the whole Ecclesiastes 3 goes through a time to talk and a time to speak and a time to do this and a time to do that. And me and Tonya have been through a lot of those seasons, right? There's a time to plant, there's a time to harvest, there's a time to do this and a time to do that. And this weekend, what ultimately came up from one of our coaches was it was a time for us to be quiet. And so there's also a time to speak. And now we're going to speak on that. But basically this weekend, we're going to share with you what we did, kind of the preference behind it, and sort of what it all meant for us.
Yeah, for sure. So for us, when we heard it's time for you to be quiet and listen, boy, that can be hard to do because like there's always these things that come up in your mind of things you need to do, and well, I have this to do and this to get done and ba 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 ba. But realistically, sometimes in our lives we do have to be quiet, and it's for us to really tap into listening to what our heart is saying, what our heart is speaking. And sometimes you can't do that when you're listening to all of the noise and the thoughts in your mind, and there's a lot of chaos and distraction. So for us, when it came to being quiet, the first thing that comes to us is to get out into nature. Nature is the one place where I know for me specifically is where I find more peace, calmness. It's where I can be quiet and just listen to silence. There's not a whole lot of distraction going on, and it's really a place for me to tap into my heart and listen to what it is speaking, and nothing else really around me.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, we live in Frisco, Texas. Everything's noisy, and we, at the gym, the music's always playing, the TV's always going, the dryer, and all those things, like, they don't seem like a distraction until you get outside in the nature, and it's silent. And then you're like, dang, our life has been noisy. And what I find is when there's a bunch of noise, life gets chaotic because it's like, oh, traffic, and this person almost hit us, and oh man, the gym, this thing and that thing, and the shopping carts and the squeaky wheel, and it's like, oh wow, you don't realize all those things
so
until
much.
they're removed.
Yeah.
And you're left with your own thoughts and your own sounds and your own conversations. And ultimately you and your favorite person, or sometimes even you and just yourself.
Right.
And so this weekend we took some time, we took the bus out, we went to the lake, and we settled in.
We did. And realistically, like, noise takes a lot of energy from you and you don't even realize it. And so for us, like, I know for me, after this weekend, like, I felt fully recharged coming back. And when you find that time to be quiet and sit in silence where there's no other noise or distraction or chaos going on, you're completely removing it, you have to find time to recharge yourself to get into a positive vibration in life, because otherwise, like, that noise and chaos and all the things wear you down and you don't even realize it.
Yeah, and ultimately, man, the phones ding, the buzzer buzzes, the whatever, like, it's non-stop emails, text messages, social media, kids game, work, church, this group, that group,
Horn
this
honking.
person. Yeah, horn honking, like, man, people honk so much. It's very energy drawing. So anyways, to get to the point was we decided to get into nature. We decided to be quiet, and we decided to hear what our heart was saying, hear what our minds were saying, hear what she was saying, hear what I was saying, and hear what God was saying. And so we left with a purpose.
Yes.
And literally, like, some of the last words that our coach said to us was, what does purposeful happiness mean? And I was like, oh man, that hit me. Like, that's something that I'm supposed to find out. And so we literally went into the woods with our bus, and we
On a mission
to find out what purposeful happiness means. And if you stop and think about that, like, sounds like two stupid words, but when you put them together, it's like, oh man, what does that mean?
Right.
So for us, we went backwards. We went at it backwards, and we decided to define what happiness was for us.
Yeah.
And when we defined happiness, it literally took us 30 or 40 hours of the weekend.
Yeah.
Like, we literally wrote down the things that make us most happy, or when we feel the most happy, or how we feel the most happy, and what those feelings feel like, or why they feel that way.
Yeah, and I think even too, because we took the bus out to a lake and went camping. And so in that time frame of pondering on that question, we were also doing things that we found made us happy. And so being out there, like going swimming, taking Journey where she could run and romp in the water. And
poop in the water.
She pooped in the water. Oh my God, it was so funny.
Oh.
Anyway, laying out in the sun, like, just, you start to find that you naturally gravitate towards the things that bring you happiness. And so paying attention to those things, and then it starts getting you into the creative space of finding the other things that make you happy. So not only were we pondering and like figuring out what is happiness to us and what brings us joy, but being in a space where we could actually live that and feel that, and it just kind of brought more of that thinking into play.
Yeah, for sure. And ultimately, like, settings play a big place. Like, we were talking with Pastor Jimmy and Chris the other day, and we were talking about how when you walk into someone's house, like, some people's feel peaceful and other people's feel like chaos. Like, everything can be put up, but like, still there's that energy, right? So when you create the energy of happiness, which for us is the bus, right? Then it starts to pour over, and then you can start to find what makes you happy and the things that whatever. Right. And so for us, we found that being in the bus brings us happiness. And travel. Like, about 4 years ago, Tonya and I sold everything we owned. We literally traveled across the country for the last 3 or 4 years. You know, we had a stop here and a stop there, but ultimately for almost 4 years, we traveled with little to nothing. Yeah. And along that path, we had stopped and taken detours, and them detours had gotten us off of our mission. And our mission is to travel the world, spread love, and help people. Whatever that looks like. Like, we haven't defined that. We haven't found the one thing, and it's probably never going to be one thing. Like, this year it's this, and next year it's going to be something different. And the year after that, like, maybe we're starting to pile all these lessons and all these skills and all these networks and all these things together, where one day it's going to be like, man, we've been doing this for like 10 years now, right? And it's going to make perfect sense. But ultimately, what we strive for every day is to travel the world, spread love, and help people. And the closer we get to that, the happier we find ourselves. And the more that we adventure, and the more people that we run into. Like, the other day we were talking, man, my cousin lives in Phoenix, Arizona. We went on this hike, and his whole family was there. Tonya was there. And I do not look like the type of person that people would just walk up to and talk to. I've always said that, like, out of my mouth. Like, I have neck tattoos, my whole body's tattooed, I'm 6'3", I'm 230 pounds, but something on me says I have a humongous heart. It's the energy that I put out. And I love it. Like, it just makes me laugh, because if I was looking for someone to talk to, I would be the last person that I would attempt to talk to. So I'm walking along this path, and I look over at this old man, and by old, I mean he's 70 years old, because I learned some stuff about him. But he's 70 years old. He looks over at me and he said, "Hey man, how are you doing?" And I could just tell in that old man's voice that he needed me to stop and have a conversation with him. So I did.
As we're all walking, and I was like, "Where is my husband?"
And Tonya turns around, and I'm still hanging out with this guy and his wife or girlfriend. Her name was Rose. I don't remember his name. I did write a post about it. I could go back and find it out. But ultimately, my point of the story is, I stood there and talked to this man. I felt like 3 hours. Maybe it was 2 hours. Maybe it was an hour. It was a very long time. Eventually, my cousin and his kids, they left us. eventually my wife got so pissed off that I was, what is my husband doing? So she came over to stand with me, and then she realized what I was doing and realized that like it was very, very important. And ultimately,
it was an intimate conversation.
Yeah, I ended up speaking with this man. He was about 70 years old, was a Golden Glove boxer his whole life, worked at a boxing gym, loved his woman.
Dude, and he could still freaking
pop hands.
Oh man.
And you know, he told stories of old fighters that he had trained and kids that he had brought off the streets and all kinds of celebrities that he had helped and all this stuff growing up in California and all these things. And I literally just stopped what I was doing to listen and hang out with this man because I felt like that was what he needed me to do. And that's that a time to be quiet. That's that follow your heart. Yeah. That's that listen to what you're supposed to be doing. And honestly, like that's part of my gift that God has given me is that ability to hear people, that ability to see people for where they are and listen to what they need and have conversations for when someone needs conversation. But also part of what he gave me was I'm a truth speaker. And when I speak the truth, it can sometimes be hard and sometimes be easy. And sometimes it's like you need a pat on the back and sometimes you need a kick in the ass.
Right.
And I'm the person that's willing to say what needs to be said. And so here we are. I'm speaking with this man for literally, it felt like 3 hours. Yeah. I'm not sure how long it was.
Probably like an hour.
At least an hour. And, you know, it was an amazing conversation. But anyways, along our story is those are the things that we've been called to throughout our travels for the last 4 years.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, that's the part of like what we love the most and what brings us happiness is, and having the time to be quiet and realize this is that we enjoy having these encounters with people from across the world. Like we were even talking about this Mary Lou's milk bottle from Seattle. And I wrote a blog post about it. They have the best huckleberry, everything you could possibly imagine. Anyway, somehow it got brought up and I read the blog post and it just brought tears to my eyes reading it because it was like, in that blog post, it was about the connection that we made with the owner. Her name is Chris. And it was just the connection that we make with people. And it's not just any connection. It's like guard down, vulnerable, open, and that's a lot of what you bring out in people. And so it's really there's so many people across our travels who we can like remember pieces of their hearts that have been left with us, and there's parts of our hearts that's been left with them. And that's what is something that truly brings happiness to us, is that ability to have that connection.
Yeah, and it's great. So being quiet
yes.
and finding that was what we did this weekend. Like we continue to determine what we want out of life or determine how we want to live life.
Right.
And what we've determined is in the last 4 years, literally getting down to a few totes worth of stuff and traveling the country, you know, literally we've been to like 35 different states, 20 some national parks, and amongst millions of people, and I mean millions of people,
yeah.
like those things bring us happiness.
Yes.
So that was literally like the first half of the weekend.
Yes.
And when it was done, it was like, yes, food, people, relationships, travel, help, spread love, listen and speak, write books, like we wrote 2 books, like those things, doing podcasts. Like I love talking and I love sharing our stories because our testimony in our life can help someone else. We've been through a ton of stuff. And so I believe it's our duty to help share that. So the first half of our weekend is literally deciding that we want to travel more and we want to continue on with our journeys and all of the things. And the second half of that was what would be purposeful. And purposeful was the hard one.
It was hard.
Because it's easy for us to say like, well, I work in nutrition and fitness. Well, we write books. Well, I make social media posts and I do stories and I legitimately take phone calls and help people on a daily basis.
Yep.
Every single day. And so we're literally living our purpose-filled, happiness day in and day out.
Right.
But we know there's more.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that more? And how do you find it?
It's all good question.
And what do you determine that to be? And how do you build off of it?
And that's where having the quiet time to ask yourself those questions and sit with it. And like I'm really big at coming up with an answer. Like shoot out an answer. Dustin hates it.
And we're gonna do a thing on love, and
Yeah.
I'm just gonna call it. I do hate it because she never takes the time to like legitimately think about the question. But we've seen, like, we had a coach one time that he said, "What do you want?" to a lady, and she was like, "I want blah 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 blah," and he looked at her and said, "You are full of shit," and she was like, took back.
Yeah.
Because she never took 1 second to think about the question, which is, what do you want? Which most people will do a thing on, what do you want? Like, most people don't know what they want. And I know that because I don't always know what I want.
Right.
And sometimes I get off of what I want because I found something else that I might want, and I think I want, and the world
It's
told me that I
shiny.
want, and it's a shiny penny, so I go over here to find what I want, ultimately to find that that's not at all what I want, and I can't get rid of it fast enough to go back to what I want.
Yeah.
So when you get asked these questions, if it's noisy, if it's chaotic, if you take 1 second to think about it, it's super simple to say, what's purposeful happiness? Well, I love helping people and spreading love and doing it every day. Like, cool, me too. What does that mean for you?
What does that mean?
Yeah, and then it's like,
yeah.
it's hard.
And it is hard. It is hard to ask yourself those questions and sit with them. And sit in that silence for a while until like you start to feel it and start to like, you just kind of know, like you get that like feeling in your stomach, and like sometimes you might not know for like, you might have to sit with it for a while. Like you're not going to get it within that day. Like it might take a week.
Oh, and we still are sitting with it 100%.
Absolutely. You might have bits that come, but and jot those things down, but continue to ask that question over and over and over, and sit with it and think with it and determine like, what does that feel like?
Yeah, because ultimately, like, start speaking it, because as you speak, like, you know what I don't want? And it's okay to say what you don't want, because you start to make room for what you do want. So anything that comes up, grumble it out, say it out. Like, yo, this is happening and I'm not really down with that. Or that person's in our life and I'm not really jiving with them anymore. And I can tell that we've outgrown this person, and I feel like this person's outgrown us. And so, like, or this opportunity has kind of passed by, and I'm okay with that. And sort of starting to speak those things out, because then you're becoming aware of the happenings that are going on in your life.
Yeah.
And when you start becoming aware of the happenings in your life, you can start to find the happiness in your life. And as you start to define happiness, finding what makes life purposeful. Like, everybody's looking for, what is their purpose? And ultimately your purpose is to be a good human, do this, do that, blah, 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 right? But to me, like, there's more to it than that.
Right.
And I believe that, you know, we've said some of my strengths, some of my God-given gifts, right? And you have gifts too. You love to create. And you love to make earrings and jewelry, and you can literally sit there for 16 hours and the time passes by. And that's a gift.
Yeah.
You know, you've always been a creative drawer and artist and painter and all of those things that help you create beauty.
Yes.
Which is your gift. You love to be strong and create beauty and do all these things, right? And that's a gift for you.
Yeah.
And so as you find your gifts, you can start to hone in on how you can use them to be purposeful.
Absolutely. And that's what we started to, you know, jot down this weekend, which I highly recommend that when you do these things, that you do write them down, whether it's in a journal. We have a whiteboard, so we wrote them on a whiteboard, took pictures of it. That way we had it, and then erased, and started to write the next thing, and just breaking it down into segments. And that way you always have that to look back on, to re-question, to examine it and figure out, so you can like really start to narrow some things down to figure out what your purpose is.
Yeah, and then like I said, you might not ever come with like, I have this is my purpose. No, but like there's certain things that you will be naturally really freaking good at. And there's certain things that you will naturally be not very good at.
Yeah, one of the things that we did, and kind of helped me jog my memory, but like we took turns writing down what are my skills, what am I good at, what are my gifts, whatever you want to call them. We kind of call them the same thing. And so writing down every single thing that you are good at doing, and then we erased it. How do we do that? We erased the ones that were not,
that you don't want to do.
you don't want to do. So like for instance, I know how to sew, but I don't want to sew.
Yeah,
right?
like
So like erase those kind of gifts, and what are the gifts that you enjoy that you could start to figure out, okay, these are the ones that, how can I make these and use them to be purposeful?
yeah, and ultimately, like it came back to we are really good at traveling, knowing how to travel, knowing how to be healthy while we travel, knowing how to eat well and
How to
work
be
out with
minimal.
little bit, and how to live minimal and things like that. Like we are freaking experts at it. But that's also a gift in this day and age. Like the goal is to collect as much stuff as you can,
And we're like,
so that
no.
you have a garage full and a basement full
Yeah.
and 2 storage units full and your neighbor's house full and the next door neighbor's house full. And the whole point of today's society is literally to collect as much crap as you can get.
Yeah.
And for me and you, being that we've moved 40 some times in our life, we've gotten used to needing to get rid of things because you can't take everything with you.
Right, and even just saying that, like, even the last couple opportunities where we've stopped for a segment and got into, like, the last, stop in Utah, having the ability to get more stuff ultimately made me realize I don't want all that stuff. And so I know that that's a gift of ours, because it's like I will start to collect it because it's like, oh, I haven't had this. I've been without for 3 years or however long we were traveling at that time. And then starting to reintroduce, and it's like, you know what? I'm actually better with less choices and less options and less things. And that makes me feel more peaceful. And that's just what works for me. It's not for everybody, but that's where it's a gift of ours.
Sure, and like ultimately we were put together for that reason. Like we are capable of living in a school bus and traveling all across the country. And that's okay, like that's gifts of ours. And it's taking that to find that, like health and fitness. We've literally been doing nutrition and fitness for a decade now. We've been doing some form of living a healthy lifestyle for a decade. Now, I'll be honest with you, like we're not the best business at it, but when it comes to knowing fitness and knowing your nutrition, I'm great, you're great, and we are a good addition to our partner, Mark,
Yeah.
who has a great business sense and a great mindset behind how to run it as a business. So when you add our do work attitude and our knowledge behind it, like it's a great addition, and we are an addition to,
We are.
not a subtraction from.
Yep.
And so when you start finding places where you can add your value to someone else's value, that's where you start to find success pile up and be compounding. And so health and fitness came up. What else came up? Cooking, like we're able to cook, but
Yeah.
those things, then you start to realize like that is what makes our life purposeful. Doing podcasts and help sharing our testimony, sharing our story, that is very helpful because someone else doesn't have to go through the struggles that we've went through
Right.
to experience life the way we now experience it.
Yeah.
Because we have the gift of sharing
Being
our
vulnerable.
experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm more than willing to share whatever.
Absolutely.
And so not everybody is. Like, my dad, that dude, he doesn't talk. Like, he would never do a podcast or something like this because it's just not who he is.
Yeah.
And so when you realize, or you start to realize your gifts, like I literally see myself filling stadiums. I literally see myself speaking on stages in front of hundreds of thousands of people because I'm big, I'm tall, I have a nice voice. I am able to speak well. I'm able to influence and motivate people. Like, those are the things, like I'm sweating right now. I am in my passion. I am in my purpose, and I am rolling. And this is what I'm good at. But that ability you have to build on. You have to continue to hone in on. You have to figure out what you want to say and what you want to do. And that's when you start to find your purpose. That's when you start to find the little tweaks that will make you into the person that God created you to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So ultimately, that was how we got to our purposeful happiness. And it's a whole lot to start to define that.
Yeah, it really is. And that's why it's so important to have that time to be quiet, so you can start to figure the things out. And not saying that you have to go out and find out what is your what is purposeful happiness for you. This is just for you guys to realize the importance of sitting in silence and having that quiet time, because sometimes we can feel like we're stuck in a season or whatever it may be, and we're not really sure the direction we need to go, or whatever the case is. Having that time to take for yourself, to sit and just be quiet and ask yourself questions. Like, go into it with a purpose, with intention, and ask questions. And don't just ask a bunch of questions. Like, pick one, hone in on that question, and really start to just sit with it and just think on it and be in the silence, so you don't have any distractions or chaos around you. Now, maybe you can't go out and go camping for a weekend, but like, maybe find some space in your home, or a space where you find that's peaceful, and create that space and go there and take the time to be quiet, because that is how we start to listen to what's really in our heart and let our heart speak to us, to find out what is actually that we want and what is the direction to lead us. And our heart will always lead us.
For sure. So with that, we ask you, what does purposeful happiness mean to you? And if that ain't your question, what is your question? And let us know what your question is.
Absolutely. So we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Again, if you guys have any suggestions of things that you want to hear us speak on, please let us know. We are open to any and all topics. And with that, we just thank you guys for watching and being a part.
And that's it, guys. Thank you.